Chapter 2. Welcome to London. As the train rolled through Arlesey and Hitchin, the already crowded coaches grew more cramped. The crisp morning air had long since been replaced with body heat and the murmur of new passengers. By the time they reached Stevenage, the once quiet carriage buzzed with renewed energy. The doors slid open with a hiss, and a group of vibrant new arrivals stepped aboard, disrupting the lull that had briefly settled. Leading the trio was a tall, broad-shouldered young man, just shy of 18, with dark skin and an effortless confidence. He wore light blue trousers, a sleek grey leather jacket, and his micro-twisted dark hair framed a sharp, alert face. He manoeuvred two heavy suitcases, as though they weighed nothing, his posture exuding self-assurance. Beside him walked two striking figures of East Asian heritage. The first was a teenage girl with a magnetic presence. Her violet Heim-cut hair flowed like a bewitching waterfall down her back, catching the light with each step. She wore a striking green winter cloak embroidered with elegant Chinese characters, in a style reminiscent of ancient scrolls. The cloak hung open over denim trousers and bright red boots, blending cultural pride with a rebellious fashion sense. She turned heads without trying. The third, clearly older, carried herself with a mix of grace and vitality. In her mid-30s, the woman's short purple hair was impeccably styled, her features refined. She wore a carefully curated outfit, traditional Chinese winterwear, interwoven with modern fashion elements. The effect was as bold as it was respectful, and her presence commanded attention with quiet authority. As the three settled into a compartment, the din of conversation reignited around them. Mei Xiang, the mother, spoke first, her English laced with a clear Chinese accent. Her words were composed, but her eyes betrayed unease. "I still don't understand why you suggested staying at your ex-boyfriend's new place in London, Anne. He's hardly dependable." Anne met her mother's gaze, the East Anglian tones of her accent asserting her determination. "We needed to get out of town, and fast. Matt's flat is the safest option right now. Maybe he's grown up since we last saw him." From behind them, the young man with the suitcases, James, chimed in with a sardonic American drawl. "I wouldn't count on that." As the train departed Stevenage, James carefully dragged his luggage down the aisle and spotted Nick sitting alone in a four-seater near the window. He paused, giving Nick a hopeful nod. "Pardon me," he said, his tone polite. "Do you mind if we take these seats? It's packed in the rest of the train." Nick smiled and gestured for them to sit. He wasn't eager to be alone with his thoughts any longer. "Sure, go ahead," he said warmly. "Thanks, man," James replied, dropping his bags and helping Anne and May take their seats. There was a brief silence as they settled in, punctuated only by the soft clatter of the train against the rails. "Are you headed to London too?" Nick asked, his voice calm but heavy. Anne nodded slowly, her expression sobering. "Yes. We've had to leave Stevenage. Because of the latest Black Death attacks." Her tone was measured, but her eyes flickered with a storm of unspoken memories. Nick nodded in solemn understanding. There was no need to ask for details. James leaned forward, curiosity lighting up his expression. "I'm James, by the way. And you are?" They shook hands. "Nick?" he replied. Nice to meet you. Anne gave a soft smile and introduced her mother. This is my mum. Her name's May. May nodded graciously. It's a pleasure, Nick. As their conversation continued, the tension in the carriage seemed to ease slightly. Nick, cautious yet comforted by the companionship, allowed himself to relax. For the first time since that dreadful night. Eventually, their talk shifted to the topic of their respective visits to London. Nick offered a nonchalant answer, though it rang hollow even in his own ears. Just heading to a mate's New Year's party. He kept his gaze fixed on the window as he said it. Anne, unbothered by the awkwardness, added with a shrug, We'll be staying at my ex's place. Not exactly ideal, but it's shelter. James snorted quietly. And drama? Let's not forget the drama. They laughed, and for a brief moment, the air in the cabin felt lighter. But just beneath the surface, each of them carried the weight of what they had left behind and what they were heading toward, with the train hurtling forward, swallowed by the deepening darkness beyond its windows. Nick, Anne, James, and May shared more than stories. They shared a fragile camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that each of them, in their own way, was running from something. As the journey progressed, the trio offered their best wishes to Nick, preparing to part ways upon arrival in London. They exchanged brief farewells, each steeling themselves for whatever challenges lay ahead. Beyond the platform, Nick offered a faint smile, then leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. He opened them to a world twisted beyond recognition. He stood in Biggleswade, or a twisted, nightmarish echo of it. The air was frozen, thick with dread. Snowflakes hung motionless in mid-air, suspended as if time itself had faltered. Every corner of the landscape was cast in stark contrasts of light and shadow, warped and stretched into grotesque forms. That bore only a passing resemblance. To the town, he knew, it was like walking through a reel of a vintage German expressionist film where reality bent and cracked under the weight of madness. The streets pulsed beneath his feet with something living, something wrong. The buildings loomed and leered, and the lamplight flickered with the erratic rhythm of a dying star. Where am I? He whispered, breath catching in the unnaturally still air. No answer, only silence, until a voice curled through the gloom, serpentine and suffocating. You're trapped. The words echoed with venom, sliding into his ears like ice water. He spun around, heart pounding. Who's there? What do you want from me? From the shadows, shapes began to coalesce. His parents. Ghostly, pale, distant. David and Sarah stared at him, with eyes filled not with love, but sorrow. Their faces were rigid masks of grief, their presence oppressive. Not again, Nick murmured, his voice cracking under the pressure of guilt and fear. David's voice drifted through the air, as weightless as mist, but as cutting as glass. You were warned, Nick. You should have listened. Each word landed like a blow. Nick moved forward, his steps slow, weighted by dread. He found himself in the same lane, the alley where they had died. The snow beneath his feet was stained dark in memory. The walls bore the same bullet holes. The cold gnawed at him, inside and out. "Mum! Dad!" he shouted, voice trembling. "Please, don't go!" But there was no reply, only silence. Then, click. A mechanical sound, sharp and metallic, fractured the stillness. And from the void came that same mocking voice, low, cruel, and unforgettable. "A New Year's gift." From Thanatos, Nick froze. A pair of red eyes emerged from the dark, glowing like coals, in the throat of the abyss. And then... "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now arriving at King's Cross Station. Please ensure you take all belongings with you before leaving the train." The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, slicing through the haze. Nick jolted upright, gasping for breath, his pulse still racing. His heart slammed against his ribs as he looked around, momentarily disoriented. The train had stopped, reality had returned. People were already rising from their seats, gathering their bags, and making for the exit. Still reeling, Nick got up and bolted into the corridor. He pushed his way through the throng of passengers. Queued up near the ticket barrier, each step feeling unsteady beneath him. The dream still clung to him like smoke, but London awaited, and with it, whatever came next. Abruptly, another train screeched into the station, disgorging a surge of passengers, who flooded the platform. In a wave of noise and motion, the atmosphere thickened with shouts, chatter, and the metallic rumble of luggage wheels, making the air feel tighter, heavier. As Nick inched closer to the ticketing area, his eyes caught on something deeply unsettling. Heavily armoured guards, their faces obscured by mirrored visors, flanked either side of the barrier. Standing at rigid attention, rifles raised but ready, they were not the usual station security. These were elite enforcers, bearing the unmistakable emblem of the Xerxes force, the emperor's personal private military contractors. Alongside them stood hulking attack drones, their mechanical limbs twitching with cold precision, scanners sweeping the crowd for any signs of deception. Anyone caught using false ID or invalid travel passes didn't simply face a fine. They were dragged away, screaming by unflinching officers. Some cried out in protest, others in pain, but all met the same fate. The guards didn't just act. They revelled in their brutality, their indifference more terrifying than rage. Nick swallowed hard. Finally, it was his turn. Trying to suppress the tremor in his hands, he placed his coat, house key, and wallet, with the Midas Industries money card, onto the tray. He stepped through the metal detector, exhaling slowly, as it remained silent. The guard in front of him didn't speak. He simply held out a gloved hand. Nick passed over his ID. The guard scanned it slowly, his expression unreadable beneath the mirrored visor. For a moment, Nick's heart threatened to punch through his ribs, but at last the man nodded once and returned the card without a word. Nick hurried forward, away from the suffocating checkpoint. Outside the barrier, he caught sight of Anne, May, and James, reuniting with someone. Presumably Anne's ex-boyfriend. Anne threw her arms around him in a warm embrace, her smile genuine. But May hung back, arms crossed, her narrowed eyes cutting through the man like a blade. It didn't take much for Nick to see her mistrust. A knot of unease tightened in his chest. Something didn't feel right. Still, he said nothing. A silent prayer formed on his lips. For their safety, for their strength, before he turned away, the ache of his own loss gnawing deeper, as he watched families reunite in the crowds. That could have been him and his parents. Now it never would be. When Nick emerged from King's Cross, the harsh reality of London hit him like a punch to the chest. This was not the city he'd once seen. In glossy brochures or holovids, this was not the London his father had spoken of with quiet nostalgia. The skyline was dominated by colossal megaflats, monolithic towers of glass and steel, crammed with thousands of residents stacked like data files. The streets, though clean, were eerily joyless, wide and functional, yet devoid of soul. Xerxes' patrols marched in tight formation, on every corner their black armour glinting under harsh artificial light. Surveillance drones buzzed overhead, and cameras were mounted on nearly every surface, scanning faces, tracking movements, logging behaviours. People moved quickly, heads down, eyes forward. Trust was currency long spent. The air itself seemed charged with tension, as if the city was holding its breath, under the crushing weight of obedience. London had once been a beacon. Now it felt like a prison. Amidst the blur of people and signs, Nick spotted it. A sleek, dark auto taxi, its display screen glowing with his name in bold letters, Nick Adams. Pickup confirmed. He approached cautiously, triple-checking the number plate and verifying the vehicle's Midas insignia. Once certain, he climbed inside. The door slid shut behind him with a quiet hiss, and the cabin hummed to life. "All right there, Mr. Nick Adams, mate?" The taxi's AI greeted in a thick Cockney accent, startling in its cheerfulness. Nick blinked. Yes, I am." "Beautiful. Just hold your horses, mate." The voice crackled with easy confidence. "Just need to check your ID. Keep still, yeah?" From the ceiling, a cable extended, its scanner glowing blue. Nick stiffened instinctively. "Easy now, mate," the AI reassured. "Just a retinal scan won't hurt a bit." The device hovered in front of his eye, emitted a soft chime, and then retracted with a smooth whir. A pause. Then, identity confirmed. Destination, 44 Billionaires Road. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, sir. The engine purred as the vehicle glided forward, seamlessly joining the traffic flow. Nick leaned forward, tapping the glowing interface on the console in front of him. A digital map of London unfolded across the screen. Cold, intricate, and daunting. He stared at the sprawl of sectors, trying to make sense of the city's fractured geography. 3 names caught his attention, each one revealing a different face of this divided capital. The first, the slum district, once the gleaming financial heart of Canary Wharf, now reduced to an urban graveyard. An oppressive aura seemed to radiate, even from its digital representation, dissuading all but the desperate from entering. It resembled a vast open-air prison, an illusion of freedom, maintained only by towering barriers and invisible walls of poverty. Here, survival was a gamble. Residents navigated its crumbling streets under constant threat. Violence, disease, starvation. Basic necessities became luxuries. dignity, a memory, and order, that belonged to the Lost, a ruthless gang who ruled through fear. Their mysterious leader, known only as the Father, was rumoured to be more myth than man, but the bloodstains left in his wake were unmistakably real. Nick shuddered as he dragged the map westward. In stark contrast lay the civil district, a bustling refuge of fragile peace. This district served as the heartland of the Mondine community, a haven amid the city's chaos. It teemed with life. Shops, cafes, homes, mosques, temples, churches, and the chattering of languages from every continent. Tourists roamed its marketplaces, drawn by its culture and cuisine. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Conversations were hushed, casual remarks were double-checked before spoken. Even the smallest misstep, a misunderstood joke, an offhand comment, could attract scrutiny from the Xerxes authority. Safety here was conditional. Tolerance had its limits. Then, nestled behind reinforced walls and steel gates, was the final sector, the Royal District. It was an entirely different world. This was where the elite dwelled. Wealthy industrialists, political figures, and imperial loyalists. Access was by invitation only. Even entering the civil district required ID and inspection, but the royal district demanded biometric scans, military clearance, and personal approval from vetted residents. It was here that Nick's uncle, William Stenhouse, resided, one of the few civilians powerful enough to claim a home in London's golden cage. He glanced up from the screen, his eyes drawn to the cityscape beyond the cab's window. The real London chilled him to his core. A mega flat loomed on the horizon. An enormous monolith housing tens of thousands, its blinking windows resembling a grid of surveillance eyes. Below it, a grim procession was underway. Xerxes' troops, clad in full body armour, were herding people, illegal immigrants by the look of it, onto a series of buses marked for relocation. The line was silent, heads bowed in surrender. Then, resistance. A lone figure broke from the line, shouting something unintelligible. Before making a dash, the crack of a rifle echoed through the air. The body crumpled to the pavement, unmoving. Nick recoiled. As a soldier strode over, looked down at the corpse, and spat with cold contempt. Around them, muffled sobs filled the street, but no one dared speak. Nick's hands clenched into fists. His stomach turned. "Driver," he said, his voice raw, strained. "Could you darken the windows? I'd rather not see any more of this." "Of course, sir," the cab's AI replied smoothly. With a soft hum, the windows shifted, tinting until the world outside was hidden behind a cold black veil. Nick leaned back in his seat, the glow of the map still flickering before him. But his thoughts were far from geography now. Seeking a distraction, Nick opened the web browser on his phone and tapped into entertainment media direct, EMD. The cab's internal speakers synced with his device, filling the space with the chirpy cadence of a morning news program. "Good morning, and Happy New Year to you." The cheerful voice of reporter Leslie Moore rang out. This is Leslie Moore with your EMD Early Morning News. We begin with an alarming update concerning the Black Death, the notorious terrorist group, whose recent escalation in attacks has reignited fear and unrest throughout the capital. In response, William Stenhouse, CEO of Midas Industries, has pledged significant resources to assist in counter-terror efforts, awaindo, offering the public a renewed sense of hope during these uncertain times. In other news, controversy surrounds Police Chief Inspector McGee after internal reports surfaced. Nick muted the stream as the cab slowed to a halt before a set of colossal iron gates, the Royal District. The perimeter wall loomed 50 metres high, its sheer face slick, grey, and practically unclimbable. Graffiti marred parts of the lower surface, twisted caricatures of soldiers, and crude political imagery. One disturbing mural caught Nick's eye, i.e., a depiction of a soldier clearly meant to resemble an American military officer viciously assaulting an unarmed civilian. It stood in stark contrast to a pristine poster of the Emperor presented as a towering divine figure of national salvation. As the gates buzzed with mechanical life, a Xerxes guard stepped forward, his rifle raised armour matte black and gleaming beneath the lights. "State your reason for being here, citizen," he barked, his eyes narrowing behind a visor. Nick met his gaze with forced calm. "I'm here to visit my uncle. I was granted access through this." He handed over a Midas Industries ID card, the embedded chip glowing faintly. The guard snatched it from his hand and inspected it, fingers hovering near the trigger of his weapon. Nick stood still, watching other soldiers at the checkpoint eye him warily. As he waited, he looked back at the wall, at the mural, the power, the fear, a silent commentary on the world he was now stepping into. "Who exactly is your uncle?" the guard demanded, suspicion still sharp in his tone. "William Stenhouse," Nick answered, voice steady but thin with nerves. "Founder and CEO of Midas Industries." The guard let out a derisive snort. "Right, and I suppose I'm the new pope." He tossed the card back carelessly, letting it clatter to the pavement. "Now beat it, kid. Don't waste my time." Nick felt the familiar sting of humiliation rise in his throat. He stepped out of the cab, brushing dust from his coat. "You'd better listen up," he said, voice rising defiantly. "You've made a mistake." The guard rolled his eyes and shoved Nick back, with a harsh crack of his rifle butt, sending him sprawling to the ground. "One more word, and I'll shoot you in the foot," the soldier growled, levelling his weapon. "Turn around and disappear." Suddenly, the soldier's comlink crackled to life. "Gate 1, confirm identity. Stenhouse's nephew is en route. Clear him immediately. Repeat. Immediate clearance authorized by Midas Industries HQ." The guard blinked, shoulders stiffening. "What? You're serious?" His sneer dissolved into a grimace. "Understood. He's confirmed." Turning back to Nick, the guard's demeanour changed. With unnatural speed, he stiffened to attention, then barked an order. "Open the gate." Another soldier activated the control panel. The massive iron gates groaned as they swung wide, revealing a road flanked by immaculately trimmed hedges and glowing street lamps. "Looks like it's your lucky day," the guard muttered, his tone clipped and sheepish. "You may proceed, sir." Nick dusted himself off and climbed back into the cab, casting one final glare at the now humbled soldier through the window as it rolled up. The guard stood frozen, his expression a mix of annoyance and anxiety, clearly aware of how close he'd come to serious trouble. Nick's breath caught in his throat. It was like entering another world. Gone were the soulless megaflats and weaponized streets. Here, towering residences gleamed like palaces, where modern elegance merged with traditional opulence. Soft amber lights lined cobblestone roads, and fragrant evergreens danced in manicured gardens. Ornate facades displayed cultural artistry from every corner of the empire, imperial baroque, alongside minimalist zen. It was wealth, it was power, and it was protected like treasure. Nick didn't know what awaited him at his uncle's mansion, but one thing was certain: he wasn't in Biggleswade anymore.